as many of you know, we have adopted the practice of the Clean Energy Task Force and the Sustainability Committee meeting together because a lot of the work that we're doing really overlaps, and that's a topic we want to discuss. So in addition to those two bodies, we have Elizabeth Mcgee with us. Elizabeth is our equity coach. Elizabeth, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure. So Elizabeth Mcgee, I work as an equity coach at Sustainable CT. I've been doing that work for about 2 years now. From Canada originally. I only say that because people usually pick up on the accent and then will ask me. So I've been in Connecticut also about 2 years. I was in California prior to that. And then kind of my work outside of Sustainable CT, because Sustainable CT is very, very part-time. I do consulting through an independent consulting company that I have called Leap Consulting, and that's usually in the area of evaluation and diversity, equity, inclusion, that kind of work. Happy to be here, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I had one call with Elizabeth, and I mean, equity is a big part of Sustainable CT, so we're really looking forward to having your help on this. One thing I neglected to do is see if we've got somebody taking minutes. Is anybody able to do that for us tonight?
If no one else volunteer, I can do it again. Oh, somebody else said something.
I can do it, Mark.
Thank you, Joe. Super. And I think everybody knows Eric Wellman, who we're thrilled to have you joining us tonight, Eric. Eric is, don't get this wrong, Eric is still first selectman. And congratulations again, Eric, on your being reelected as a selectman. So, and Eric really asked to join the meeting tonight. So we've got an agenda item that is of particular interest, and maybe we'll get you to listen in on some of the equity discussion as well, because you probably have a good sense of some things that are going on in town that might fit into that category. So thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
So our first item on the agenda is public audience. And that would really just relate to, I guess, to Eric and to Elizabeth, having both introduced yourselves. Would anything you'd like to add to public audience? No, then we'll move on. So next item is the October minutes. Ray, thank you for doing those. They went out yesterday, maybe the day before. And so did anybody have any, I can pull them up on the screen, and so we can just take a quick look. Does anybody have any comments, any edits? I did not. So if not, is there a motion to approve the October minutes?
Motion to approve.
A second. I'll second that.
Second. Oh, go for it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed or abstentions? All right, great. So I got some background noise, so I was muting myself for a second. So I think the next item is this topic that I know we've broached briefly in the past, and that is that we've got the Clean Energy Task Force, we've got the Sustainability Committee, both have existed independently. It's had this structure that, amongst other things, has required people like Tim, myself, and I think that's maybe all we have right now, but we've had others in the past who were really required to be on both, right? I think if you look at the charter, there were like 3 people who needed to be, who represent Clean Energy Task Force on the Sustainability Committee. So I think there's a lot for both boards to do, but there is discussion of not just doing meetings together, but actually formally combining these. And I think we wanted to have a discussion. Eric really wanted to engage us in a discussion. So Eric, why don't I think it's okay to let you, have any comments you'd like at this point on this issue.
Sure. So just today, we met as a personnel subcommittee to have a discussion about looking at all of our boards and commissions and seeing if there are any that make sense to, there are a few that we're talking about sunsetting that are no longer as active as they used to be, or their reason for existing doesn't, there's not a need anymore. Then there are others that are highly active groups such as yourself, where it could make sense to formally combine. And I wanted to get this group's perspective on one scenario, but I'm definitely not wed to this particular scenario. But it would be the idea of perhaps rebranding this group as a sustainability committee. And then under that would be the different work that you do. So as a piece of sustainability is clean energy. Another piece of that would be the sustainable CT, recertification process. Potentially down the road, if there were members that were interested, there could be a recycling component, but it would be under the larger umbrella of sustainability. And I wanted to get this group's reaction to that idea.
Well, thank you, Eric, for giving us the chance to have that discussion and not just sort of having the personnel committee make it for us. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on is that the right structure or alternatives?
Mark, I'll start. My own personal opinion is it makes a lot of sense to do that. You've talked about the overlap of the team members. Sustainability is very much focused on the process of completing that questionnaire, if you will, and getting recertified. But the bigger objective really is to say, where are the gaps, where are the opportunities within the town to make us more sustainable? And clearly, clean energy is a major component of that. Equity is a major component of that. And there's a lot of overlap that we're talking about. So, to me, it just makes a lot of sense to bring them both together. That's just from a practical perspective around what our tasks are associated with. The other aspect of it is we do have too many committees in town. We are looking for ways to consolidate. We should look for opportunities to do that where we can. This seems to be a logical one to do. Why not do it?
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
I also agree with Bob's thought. I think just giving it that title really solidifies it, and then we have the subparts underneath it. Sorry for the background.
Sounds like they like the idea too.
And
Super,
if I
thanks,
could, I
Tim.
can just throw in a kind of a little background. The Clean Energy Task Force originally started out with a very specific goal, which was the 20% by 2010. And I think it was founded back in 2008. And again, I think in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of very energetic folks looking for things that we can do that are clean energy related. But I think as a larger board, we haven't had a defined direction. And I think following the sustainability as a starting point is good. And then I also would look or suggest that they look to the Board of Selectmen for some targeted areas that they can focus on and where they can really be a resource to the town.
Thank you, Tom. By the way, my apologies, Tom and Ray, you are such familiar faces that I neglected to introduce you to Elizabeth. Tom is Director of Public Works and Ray works directly for Tom. So
Officially,
Should've
Ray
done
is
that.
project administrator, but I think he would agree to your title.
My job title is whatever Tom tells me to do.
Okay.
You guys
And
are
it's a
painting a
lot.
bad picture of me to Elizabeth here.
No, the Public Works has an incredibly broad remit and gets a lot done really, really well. And we've worked really closely with Public Works. The other just comment I would make is, I have had a lot of contact with other environmental advocates across the state. And this, I know of, I think I've mentioned Fairfield, and I know of at least one other town, I can't remember which one it was, has rebranded. They used to have a clean energy task force, and now they have a sustainability team. And they both seem to have gone to this name, Sustainable Fairfield, for example.
Okay.
So I like that as Sustainable Simsbury, but I think that seems to be the trend rather than putting sustainability under clean energy. I think
Yeah.
sustainability is really the broader concept. And down the road, it might lead us to actually have more influence, right? Because we can address issues of sustainability, perhaps go before zoning or design review and commenting on sustainability issues for a development or something. So I think combining forces can, and I think it's Bob, as you put really well, moving beyond just the sort of gathering points, really looking at what are the gaps and what do we need to do in town to, and in the broad sense of sustainability.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Great.
other aspect of that is, putting my economic development hat on, I mean, there's so much overlap there too, about what we're trying to do from a sustainability perspective. It is all about economic development as well. And so to the extent this is a larger group, has a little more influence on development aspects of it, gives us more clout in town. I think that's all positive.
Good. Okay. Well, thanks so much for the feedback. Now that I'm, stepping back from being first selectman, it's going to allow me to be less of a generalist and spend more time in areas that I'm really deeply interested in. And I hope to spend more time with this group in particular. It's something that I feel like this group has been, really one of our shining lights and most effective committees over the past 4 years. And I've just been so interested in this work, and I look forward to spending more time with you to make sure it's getting the attention that it needs, and perhaps help you navigate those things to get in front of, whatever those other boards are that might be able to elevate your work.
Eric, from a practical perspective, what does it take to actually make that happen?
I'm lobbying Wendy to appoint me as liaison to this committee. But, I expect that'll happen. But even if that doesn't happen, there's nothing that stops me or anybody else in this community from attending these meetings.
No, I guess
so I'd like to stay engaged either way.
Yeah, let me rephrase the question. So if what is it going to take to bring the Clean Energy Task Force and sustainability into one?
So the Board of
formal...
Selectmen, at one of our meetings, I think next month, is going to formally do that.
Okay. So there'll be a recommendation to the board to do that, and then the board will vote on it. Okay.
Exactly. And I just really wanted to meet with this group ahead of time, so it's not a surprise and that it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Well, we would welcome having more involvement from you, Eric. I know you already were a big help to me recently in conversations about the Latimer Lane project, and has already led to us, talking to the right people and knowing where to go. So that'd be great. And we've got a lot of work to do.
Awesome.
Terrific. I think that was really getting a sense of the group. I don't think we need a vote on that. Great. Well, our next item is really a big one. As we mentioned, so Elizabeth Mcgee is our equity coach, and anybody even superficially familiar with Sustainable CT knows that equity is a really important part of it. And even beyond Sustainable CT, I mean, I have not been in many meetings where environmental issues are discussed lately, where equity, environmental justice doesn't come up, right? It's just, it's really important if we're gonna, address, I mean, the whole notion of, who caused climate change and who bears the burden is just, there's a huge disequities there. So the Sustainable CT program has really done some interesting work on the whole topic of equity. In terms of our getting certified next year, I think we have a good chance of gathering enough points. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that are already going on, and if we really focus, we can sort of do something in each category and probably get enough points. I think probably one of the hardest things we're going to have to do, and this was a big challenge. Tom can speak to this. A couple of years ago was these 3 equity projects, really doing projects through this equity lens, and we have time to do that, but I think that was really going to require us to, I think, let's start tonight with getting our heads around this whole topic of equity and the equity toolkit and how sustainable CT looks at it. And then let's brainstorm about what types of projects could we do with an equity lens, and then we can really focus. But so let me hand it over to you, Elizabeth. Again, thanks for joining us, and really any way you want to attack this. But I think we talked about maybe going through how sustainable CT looks at equity and through this toolkit.
Sure. Yeah. I'll probably share screen. Can you guys see the equity toolkit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to give a little background, to kind of build on what Mark was saying, equity wasn't always part of the sustainable CT model. They kind of started on that journey about 5 years ago. And I think I want to say around the same time introduced equity coaches, because they were finding that it wasn't enough to just tell towns like, hey, go do this equity piece. Like, folks really needed more support. And so we're constantly tweaking the equity supports that we offer, what the coaching looks like. The toolkit has been one of our kind of central tools to support municipalities in doing this. I'll put the link, or I'll put, actually, I'll probably pass it to Mark in terms of getting this document to you guys all if you don't have it already. But I wanted to kind of zero in on some important parts of this toolkit that I think are relevant to this conversation. So one of the things that, maybe I'll come back to that piece there. Here, I'll start here. So there's kind of like 5, this is just to get down to like the nuts and bolts of it. So when you're looking at any of the actions that sustainable CT has that, municipalities are working towards, really, we're going to advocate that all of them should have equity considered as part of them. There's not any action related to sustainability that you'd pursue without considering equity, but we don't require equity currently for all of them. So depending on the level of certification, there's different equity requirements. How it stands now is that there's this toolkit that you quote unquote apply to an action, and that's how you get the equity component baked into whatever sustainability action that you're pursuing. And so when we say that you're going to use the equity toolkit, it's really about going through this 5-step submission process where you consider equity, like I said, in pursuing that sustainable action. In integrating equity, the biggest, without reading, they're there, you can kind of, glance at them on the screen, but without reading them all out, I would say like the central part of how we're building, or how we're advocating that you build in equity, is really through community engagement. So, you're not creating green space, you're not creating affordable housing without considering the community, stance on that issue, or their opinions, or their ideas for solutions, or needs they have in that area. So how you engage the community is going to look different depending on what sustainable action that you're pursuing, given the history of what you've done around that particular issue in your community. I really tell people that I'm not here to tell you what to do. It's really about giving you tools and you really knowing your community best and knowing how to best engage them. So we do offer this as as a framework, so not a checkbox thing that you must follow, but really a framework to kind of operationalize, or to make community engagement something that's a little bit more concrete for folks. So, it starts off at inform at the lowest level. So we're just informing the community that something's happening, versus the other end of the spectrum that's like we're empowering them to really be the decision makers. In some cases, I've even seen communities give pots of funding to the community, and then they, own that initiative and dictate the budget. So again, we're not saying you have to do empower all of the time, or you should never do inform. Again, it's really about when you select that sustainable initiative that you're going to pursue, and you're like, okay, this is the one that makes sense for us to do a little bit of a deeper dive around equity, looking at this continuum and saying, okay, where does it make sense for us to engage the community? Okay, it's involved, or it's at the consult level, and then finding the best strategies to do that. And again, this isn't to simplify equity to be equity is community engagement. It's not that simple. I think people can do community engagement and think they're doing it really well, and it's not equitable if you're, engaging the usual suspects all of the time. So there's definitely a lot of coaching that I do around once you select the initiative, once you figure out how you might want to engage the community, that's really where the coaching support kicks in, and where I offer a lot of guidance of how to best engage the community, how to look at it from multiple vantage points to make sure that you're really getting at that equity or true equity. One of the other caveats I'll give is I'm not involved in the certification. So all of the equity coaches are hired as consultants. Most of us are independent consultants that kind of do equity work. So I can tell you what I've seen as successful applications, but I'm not here to say like, I can promise you this is going to go through because I'm the one that approves it. It's not that type of a setup. But yeah, that's kind of the high level overview. And then one of the other, let me stop share and reshare. One of the other documents that I was telling Mark about, actually, I'll just pause there. Any questions on that before I pull up another document? Okay.
Just a quick question, Elizabeth. Does so Simsbury has a group we call the Spirit Council, which is our DEI champions. In other towns that you've worked with, how have the sustainability teams worked with the, their Spirit Council like equivalent in this kind of work? Because I think there's a natural fit there.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually something that Mark and I talked about on our initial call. And that's so why you probably saw me like nodding at a ton when you were talking about combining committees. One of the things that we're really seeing is that municipalities are often siloed in their committee work. And when you're looking at something as broad as sustainability, when you're looking at something as broad as equity, that siloing is just not, it's counterproductive. It doesn't work well. So to answer your question, I often don't see them playing together. I'll make that recommendation, but often it's not done very not systematically, but it's not done very with a lot of intentionality. And so I strongly encourage that those two committees work together. Again, yes, the end goal, is this certification, but the certification is really just the carrot that we're hanging to bring people mobilizing people around this work. So yeah, I absolutely think that, having those two committees work together around this stuff is a great idea and will only make the work better. Yeah. I love that.
I invited Cheryl Cook and Nicole Kodak to join us tonight, but they had other commitments. But I think we probably were going to need a separate meeting anyway. So I think we organized a separate meeting with them because, there's such a huge overlap or sort of mutuality of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I obviously don't want to speak for them, but I think they'd be really interested in this.
We had them present at our EDC, and even though the Spirit Group is focused on, if you will, diversity and inclusion, what have you, it clearly is an economic development driver for the community, and we saw a connection to that. I mean, it was pretty obvious, and so to the extent that it's part of sustainability as well, whether we combine the groups, I don't know. I mean, I think it's more important that just we keep communication open, keep collaboration open, keep thinking about each other, as opportunities like this present themselves, we need to be thinking about the broader community. Who else is involved? How do we get them involved with this stuff? There's so much that, as I was going through the sustainability questionnaire, if you will, there's a lot that Spirit Council is already doing.
Oh.
I mean, the whole conversation for the community around affordable housing and, the sponsorship of them to get the community come together. I forget how many people were on that particular Zoom call, but it was huge. The interest around that and the education that occurred as a result of that was tremendous. And, it's those kinds of opportunities and activities that I think the sustainability team is looking for. The Spirit Council has monthly presentations through the public library on topics of interest, for the community. And so, how do we connect with that aspect of it to help us with, what we're trying to do here from a sustainability perspective? So absolutely. That's the collaboration that needs to take place across the various commissions here in town. That's really what makes it work. So we definitely got to keep those folks in mind.
Yeah. And I think even, being completely transparent, one of the things on Sustainable CT side is like, we require select men or woman person sign off, to engage in this process of certification, but then we don't do anything to keep the select person in, there's no requirement for them to have sustained engagement.
Right.
And so I know, Eric, I think were the selectmen and now, is that right? You were, but
currently first selectman. In a few weeks, I'll be regular selectman.
Okay. Gotcha. So I just love it that you're here and part of these conversations, because to me, whoever's in that role of, selectmen can really have that bird's eye view of what's going on across the committees. Right. So even if there's committees that you guys don't formally partner with or engage with throughout this process, having someone that can speak to, hey, they're doing this thing over there, maybe around, even bringing folks in for a specific meeting where you're tackling, affordable housing, like you mentioned, Bob. Yeah. I think the other thing I see often, kind of building on what you're saying, Bob, is sometimes, the sustainability folks won't see that connection to equity. And then sometimes the equity folks won't see the connection to, say, sustainability or economic development, like you said. So I think, education on both sides, or even just communication on both sides, right, is so central to this work. Again, yes, it's this, we're working towards this certification things, but this, and sometimes those can be, to get certified, to check that box might be, a relatively easy lift. But if we're actually trying to engage deeply around these issues and sustain the wins that we get around these issues, this is complex work that does need to be, cross committee, have that selectman buy-in, all of that stuff. So yeah, I think everything you guys are saying is making me happy, because it's the stuff that I try to preach to other towns to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the notes I jotted down is I'm involved, or I participate with the Chamber of Commerce in the Government Affairs Committee meetings once a month. And the thought is to have the Spirit Council come and present to them, to the business community, and say, here's what we're all about, and educate them on on what we're trying to do and the benefits to the business community of supporting their efforts as well. And I think it'll be important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can share the second document. This is kind of getting down to taxes. Okay, so this is kind of a document that I created, because what I was finding, and I think you guys are kind of at that same stage, is you might have like multiple ideas for initiatives that could work for sustainability, because like I said, most initiatives could have or should have some element of sustainability. So even just, in these preliminary stages, just listing, am I scrolled over enough that you can see? think this goes a little farther. Well, yeah, essentially you'd write down all the initiatives that you have as potentials to go through this process. And then once you start to think through those 5 steps, these are the ones from directly from the toolkit of what you have to do to engage the community to then check off this equity part of the sustainability or Sustainable CT's equity toolkit. You can think like, okay, does this sustainability initiative really work for getting this equity component? Or, we already engaged the public 3 years ago around that topic. It doesn't really make sense for us to do it again, right? So thinking of, like I said, the history of what you've done in the community around particular issues. So this isn't sophisticated. This is very straightforward, but I find it's helpful in this kind of preliminary brainstorming phase to just kind of write down all the potential initiatives and then start to maybe take notes of what it would look like if you were to do some of these things. So how would we, who would get involved in this issue? How would we engage the community around this issue? And then that can maybe help you narrow down like, okay, it makes most sense to do this particular issue given the feasibility of doing some of the community engagement and equity work. And so I think Mark and I didn't talk about whether, like in the context of tonight's meeting, whether it would make sense to start actually listing any ideas. So I'll ask Mark if that's next meeting or how we want to do that piece, but that's really all I wanted to do as an intro to you guys. And then again, if there's any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I would not want to cut anybody off if they got ideas on the tip of their tongue. But one thing that I think might help get our heads around it is briefly, let's take a quick look at what we did 2 years ago. And then there are some interesting examples that the Sustainable CT team gave us that may be relevant for us as well. So, and just so we know, I went back and jogged my memory. We did, we got certified as silver 2 years ago. So to do that, you need 3 projects where you optimize for equity. And our 3 were, and I'll just really show really quickly what we submitted. So 2019, and then it was action 9. Now it's action 1. But we did the MLK. So the MLK Memorial. So, the whole process of going through, and I think it was slightly different steps and submission requirements then, but, the process of sort of engaging the community, informing folks, looking at, who are the stakeholders, who's involved. So that was one. Another was the discussion of equity in the Simsbury Public Schools. And I think this came primarily out of some of the racial or the racial incident. I think the blackface incident at the high school, and there was a really thorough and engaging process of a lot of stakeholders that we basically showed here. And then the last one was the Rainbow Crosswalk. So again, one that was done, with very, very inclusively. So those were the 3 we did. And the other thing I just wanted to show you, and if anybody wants any more of these documents, I can send them around. But one I will definitely send around. I should have done this already, but the Sustainable CT team
Is Mark froze for anyone else?
Yeah.
Is it me or Mark,
I know, I always have that moment of.
I thought it was just me.
Yeah.
Mark, you froze up there. I don't know if you want to try that again. Your connection's better now. He's not answering me, Eric. Maybe you ought to give him a try.
Okay. So one of the things we need to do is build a proper infrastructure to support Wi-Fi to all our remote communities here in town.
Hold on.
looks like I went out there for a minute.
You did?
I'll send these around, but one example was this old lime, very much with the engaging the business community, right? Another one that was sent to us was East Hartford, and that one was a public library. Implement your own sustainability action. This was it was a grant for transformation for libraries, and this is the one they ended up forming. So they had a series of activities that were just, again, including of the community. And then Bethany, I think, was more of a arts. They ended up developing a poet laureate program, a whole program of arts and culture. So, I mean, these are just 3 examples which the Sustainable CT team shared with us. But what I was starting to say, where I maybe lost my connection, was one of the things with the program is you can go and look what every other town has submitted for their equity projects. So there's lots of, and there's also people on the Sustainable CT team who kind of know what was done. So if we reach out and say, hey, is there anything really interesting along the lines of transportation or culture, they can probably say, yeah, go look at what this town and that. Great resources for us. But I thought maybe just to kind of help us get a flavor, those are some things that we did, and then some other things that other towns have done.
So Mark, just a question. The monthly series that the Spirit Council hosts through the public library on diversity inclusion topics, do you view that as a one separate project, or can we look at those series of presentations as, individually as projects? Because those have been the one on affordable housing I thought was extremely well done. And it was community wide. It was extremely educational. And I just think, those kinds of things are in line, I think, with the intent of what they're trying to accomplish here. So I was curious how we would do that.
I have a quick thought on that one. So yeah, I love the idea of leveraging what you're talking about. I think even so if we're thinking of that continuum again, like anything that's educational would be on that inform level. So we're informing them about affordable housing. I think the fact though that you're informing them about an equity topic is really great too. And then I think if you could collaborate or work with those people to say, hey, can we, so say they're talking about affordable housing, they get educated initially, the audience gets educated, but then there's maybe like an hour that's added to the agenda that's like, hey, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on, affordable housing in our town. What are the needs? What are the strengths? That kind of thing. So then you're upping that level of engagement just a little bit further. So just a thought off the top of my head.
Okay. And then the other thing that came to mind was the whole Meadowwood project.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, with, the purchasing of the land, the memorial that we're going to be building around the Martin Luther King involvement with tobacco farming, if you will. I don't know if we can take credit for that just because we bought the land, or do we have to wait until the whole project's completed? I don't know, but that one obviously jumps out.
That's just from a timeline perspective, that work is likely going to be happening this spring.
That's a great one. Yeah, because some of the work's been done, but my sense is there's probably still a lot more and a lot more ways to engage the community. So those are 2 great ideas.
Okay.
Yeah. One other one, I don't know, this was at least probably about 2 years ago, is our library went fine free, which we've been able to show has improved circulation, and there's a certain number of children that aren't able to use the library because of the fines, and forgiving those fines has it's an equity issue.
So I think what we're probably going to want to do, and it may be beyond, we've got some other things to cover tonight, but maybe devote an entire meeting to the spreadsheet that and start to list some of these. And I don't know, if we do that our own, or whether you'd be willing to hold our hand a little further, Elizabeth, as we go through some of this, but to start to fill up for each of these. How would we start to think about the answering these questions, and try to get a get a list of some things that we know of happening, or groups are doing, maybe even some new stuff.
Yeah. And I think, even as part of that, familiarizing, and I'm speaking also about myself, of I constantly have to revisit all those different actions, because sometimes there's work that's being done that actually is just better suited to be the fulfillment of a sustainable CT action, and not necessarily something that makes sense to walk through the equity toolkit, which is again really around like deeper community engagement. So I think as we brainstorm these, also just being cognizant of like, okay, does this actually fit under just the fulfillment of an action? So we can do that too. Because I'm thinking the Martin Luther King one might go under like some of the cultural actions, unless you guys anticipate, or there was like deeper community engagement done around it. But anyway, we don't have to go into all of that tonight. I can put the ideas that were recorded tonight in the spreadsheet. Oh, you changed locations, Mark. You're at the top now, you're down here. I can put those in the spreadsheet and then send that back, just so we have a record of what we discussed tonight.
That'd be great. I mean, this was really hoping to get done tonight, is get us to start to get our heads around this topic, start to maybe throw out some ideas. But I think now we need a real working session where we pick, try to list. So let's try to each generate some ideas. And I would say this is such an important topic. Let's dedicate a significant part of our next meeting.
Yes,
to
totally
this.
agree with
If you're able to
that.
join us, Elizabeth, that would be great. If not, we can maybe prep a little beforehand.
That would be terrific.
And if anybody has questions, so Elizabeth, I didn't introduce everybody very well. So Bob, I think you picked up as head of Economic Development Commission. Joe is on the Recycling Committee. Tim is a school teacher in town. So each kind of bring different perspectives to this. But so if any of you have questions on things you think might work or might be interesting for this, then let's exchange emails so that we a little bit for that next meeting. Terrific. Well, I'm already more optimistic that we can get these three, and also just kind of change the way we think about doing things, that we sort of have this equity lens.
I think having
Great.
the coach is the best part. We were really trying to wrap our heads around it, but having someone as an expert in the field is really going to help us to narrow it down.
Yep. That was
Happy to help.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. You're welcome to stay. We're going to move on to some other items. So if you to drop off, we understand that.
I'll probably go eat my dinner if that's okay.
Sure.
It's a part of sustaining. No, I was going to make a joke, but it's just not quite there. Wasn't well thought through. Okay, it was great to meet you all. I look forward to being at your next meeting and discussing this more.
All right.
Super.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. All right. Next. So what we've got next on our agenda, I think we've got an update on the Clean Energy Task Force activities and an update from the Sustainability Committee. Let me just, since we're on sustainability, I don't think I have a lot more to report on that. I do want to mention one other item. Let me quick pull it up, which I think is kind of exciting. It's going to take some work, as all of these things do, but let me share my screen. This came from the Sustainable CT team, from Jess LeClaire. And she wants to let us know of an exciting opportunity to work with the nature concerns our community's vulnerability to climate change. It's free to the community, will get us 20 points. And they've apparently developed this program with the Nature Conservancy to do these resilience building workshops, and we'll basically assess Simsbury's climate vulnerability, and then together we'll sort of develop a plan, a sustainability action plan. So it seems like a really exciting opportunity that they've put this together with some real experts. It's not going to come without some work, and so they want us to submit a letter of interest. And this document that they submitted that is attached gives you a little more information. But part of what they want is a core team right here. And they're suggesting representatives from Department of Public Works, Planning, Police, Fire, Emergency Response, Social Services, Economic Development, Governing Body, Board of Ed. So I don't know if we need every single one of those, but it's a significant group. Now it's sounds like basically, and there's they need to do a half-day workshop, and then I'm going to guess there's going to be a couple of meetings. So I think that's the extent of the involvement. And so I think it'd be really exciting if we can do this. It's going to need trying to try to identify at least a couple of these representatives. We don't need necessarily everybody on the team, but we'll reach out to some of the others. And then if we have that core team, then submit that letter of interest. So any thoughts on whether we could pull a team together for that?
I'd love to participate. So from an economic development perspective, I think it's very important. So
Yeah, I
I'd love
would
to
too.
see what we can do.
Yep. I think part of the challenge is it looks like they're looking for a town staff. So you think we can get a couple of those people listed to do a half-day workshop and a couple of meetings?
Yep. Maybe it's a smaller group that goes to the meetings and comes back and reports to the larger group.
Right.
I think for me, I think it's just going to depend on when. Right now, things are about as busy as they've ever been. But if we can free up Ray, or if there's somebody else that's appropriate.
Yeah, it looks like we need to do the workshop by February 25th.
And it's an actual in-person workshop, Mark, or is it a webinar or a Zoom?
I don't think so. Something made me think can be virtual. Here it is. Well, as anticipated, sessions will be offered online via Zoom. The possibility of an in-person event can be discussed. I think part of the challenge for me is going to be kind of reaching out to these people. I mean, I don't know how successful that letter needs to come from a municipal representative. So we think we need somebody on. Let me just show you that letter again. It says, on behalf of the municipality, and then name of municipal representative of either elected official or municipal staff. Somebody to sort of put their name on the letter, and then we start to list some of the members of the team. So that's that. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. So I guess, do you think, Tom, if we work together on this, someone on your team could issue that letter and maybe make a few inquiries?
Again, I'm sure we can find a way to help out.
Well, let's see if it works. If it's not, then we let it go. I know we had a similar, somewhat similar opportunity. And that was to get points for equity training. There is a program. We were just talking a lot about equity. Sustainable CT has equity training, but it's 12 hours.
Yeah.
And they require like director level. It would have to be Tom or Mike Glidden and because I think even Melissa Appleby might have been willing to do it, but that wasn't high enough, right? So, and to get, I think it was 3 people at that level to do 3 4-hour training sessions. We just said, it's not going to happen. So this one seems a little more manageable, but so let's maybe
Yeah, I couldn't see it too well on screen, obviously, and I'm working off a smaller computer, but I'll take a look at it. And again, if it's something that we can reasonably accommodate, we're going to do it.
Yep.
But at the same time, Mark, your salesmanship on this has been tough. You know, oh my God, 12-hour sessions.
Well, that one's over. We let that one go.
I think that was a little, yeah, given to how busy everybody is, to ask that kind of a commitment, I thought was unrealistic. So
I think it's an exciting opportunity to learn something in a seminar. It's a very exciting opportunity.
Yeah. But assessing our climate vulnerability would be kind of cool. You know, with nature conserve would be pretty cool. So
Yeah,
maybe-
you know, like we've talked about, and I'm hoping to clear up a little time in my calendar over the next few months. We have some staff positions that have been vacant and really pulling everybody thin. Hopefully, they're going to be backfilled and we'll be back up closer to full strength and be able to, you know, get involved in some of this stuff.
I'm going to meet with Jess LeClaire from Sustainable CT next week. I'll get a little more information, see what sort of we might be able to get away with in terms of a core team. That's all I had on Sustainable CT. I don't know if anybody else have any. There's that.
Mark, you want to announce to the team that you're the key presenter next week at the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs
Right.
meeting.
Oh, right. Okay. That's right. I forgot about that. Yes. So thank you, Bob. I got, it actually kind of came circuitously, but so I'm going to speak for it's the government, is it the Government Affairs Committee of
Yes.
the Chamber? So they like to circle around with different people doing, you know, and I mean, involved in government. It's a really good program, but so I'm going to take advantage of that to talk about the Sustainable CT and also clean energy. So that is next. It's the
Next
16th.
Tuesday, 9:00 at the public library. If anybody wants to attend.
That's right. That one's in person. Yeah.
Yep.
And there are things going on. I know after our last meeting, Susan Olson, who was a guest to the meeting, raised her hand and said she wants to take up the issue of pollinator pathways. Because I think if you look at the requirements for the points for pollinator, we've done them all. We've done them all, or we're going to do them. You know, we issued a town proclamation or a town resolution, and we're going to build these gardens, and we're doing outreach. So those are the three things. So Susan is going to work with Joe Campolita, Nancy Grandin, and Jane Spatcher on those. So there are other good things going on. So continue to kind of peruse the list and find things that you're willing to you know, take the lead on or reach out to somebody on. Tim, we've got those potential points for all the watershed and wildlife inventory work that, you know, somebody's got to kind of follow through on.
Yep.
All right. So anything else on Sustainable CT or the Sustainability Committee? If not, then quick update on clean energy. So the big things going on. So we talked last meeting about holding off on releasing our climate emergency resolution. And let's get our energy plan out there. Let's focus on that. And then once we get through the budget process, the town budget process, and hopefully put in a request for an energy manager, either full or part-time, then in conjunction with that, issue our climate emergency resolution. So, and then the other big thing, there's two more big things going on. The energy plan that we've drafted, we will go before the Board of Selectmen January 10th to present that. And I reached out to the Board of Ed and maybe around the same, we're not on the calendar yet, but they want to actually do it so that the board members will have their attention. So I think they want to get through the budgeting process as well. But I spoke with Susan Solina about that. So we'll get before the Board of Ed to present that as well. So January 10th for the Board of Selectmen, and I'll get you a date for Board of Ed. And please, anybody who wants to attend and take part in that presentation, that would be, you know, show of force is always good. So the other big, really exciting thing going on, and we've talked about this in past meetings, is the Latimer Lane renovation that had some really, really interesting developments. I can't remember how much of this we talked about at the last meeting, but I got invited to come speak to the Public Building Committee. That was really thanks to Jason Casey and Neil Sullivan at the Board of Ed. So I spoke really briefly to the Public Building Committee a couple of weeks ago, raised the idea of net zero schools, all electric schools, pointed out that there are two great examples of this being done in Connecticut right now. Mansfield is building a new net zero school, and Manchester is doing a renovation, also net zero. So they suggested that I meet with the architects and engineers. So we had a separate meeting, talked all about HVAC systems, and the architects and engineers, they've done this, right? They've done it for other towns. They know how to do it. They know what's going on in Mansfield, Manchester in more detail than I could. And then the next Public Building Committee, they reported back. And what was really exciting was the HVAC systems that they, I think, what's his name? Rick Ostap says, long story short, what would you recommend? And they would recommend a geothermal system, which is an all electric system. Costs more up front, but extremely efficient then over time. And the fallback was a hybrid, part geothermal, part air source heat pump. So there's been no decisions. Both of those would cost more than the traditional, but those are the top two recommendations of the CES, which is the MEP engineers. So if we end up with either one of those, I think those would be huge success, because they're both all electric systems, right? So no more combustion of fossil fuels, and they're extremely efficient, right? Once you do make the investment of doing the boreholes, then you've got very inexpensive heating and cooling. And if you put solar on the roof with a power purchase agreement, which is what we're doing on the high school, which again is zero money down, lowers your actual energy costs immediately, then you essentially have zero. You can have zero energy costs. So that was really exciting. But it was also clear from that meeting that the architects were saying, as we start to plan things like the kitchen and the appliances and also the building envelope, we need guidance, right? What does the school system want? So I went to the Board of Ed meeting last night and just spoke in public audience, and said, please give direction to the architects and the engineers on this, because they know how to do net zero. If we ask them to, they will do it. Or at least they'll present that as an option. If we don't ask them, it will probably never happen. But if we ask them, they will present it. The interesting thing is the budget's been set on Latimer. It's $36 million. So we don't know if we get a Ford geothermal or a Ford, an air source heat pump, or but it's all, I don't think anybody knows that yet. So, but I think what we're hoping for is to at least have an option, an all electric option, in the mix, and then we'll see where it goes. So, really exciting movement so far, though. The building committee and the architects and engineers have been very engaging, and so the architects and engineers will go before the Board of Ed December 14th, where they'll be reporting on all of this. So that's really the opportunity where we hope the Board of Ed says, yes, please, please give us a number, give us an option that is also a potential net zero building. So I know, Eric, thank you for your help in putting me in touch with Sharon Thompson. She actually raised the topic at the Board of Ed meeting, got it sort of rolling. And then I gave it the 1-2 in the public audience. So we have it, we think of all the things we've done in clean energy task force. We've done light bulb swaps and solar. A net zero Latimer renovation would dwarf all of that, right? It would have far more favorable environmental impact than anything we've ever done.
Hey, Mark.
Exciting.
Yeah, Joe.
Mark, are the buildings in Manchester and Mansfield, are they already constructed and running?
No, they're being built.
Oh, okay. So those didn't appear in their certifications last time they were certified, probably. For sustainable
Right,
CT.
right. No, probably not. There was
I was just wondering if there was a write-up on them anywhere besides maybe just the news, or
I will send I'll send you something around. There was an excellent conference that Eversource held about a month ago called they do it every year, the Zero Energy Building Conference. And they had an excellent presentation about these two net zero schools. And it had people from the education system and the architects and the engineers. And it went into a lot of detail on these two projects. There's a recording, so I'll send you a link to that recording. I also took notes on it, so I'll send you my notes and I'll send you a link to that recording. But that is just huge for us that there are two schools in Connecticut who have done this, because there's all kinds of state regulations for schools and paperwork and bureaucracy that they've actually been through. So
the superintendent for the Mansfield schools lives in Simsbury.
right.
Kelly Lyman is her name. She's a wonderful person. She would be very happy to come talk to the group if that would be of value to the team.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's think about when that might make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe public audience at the next Board of Ed meeting.
Yeah, if we could get her in front of the Board of Ed, and Kelly knows Matt Curtis, she knows all that group, Lydia and the whole group. And, to get her and talk about their experiences, because she's obviously very, very proud of what they're doing and very excited about what they're doing. So,
Do you know Kelly?
oh yeah, I know her very well.
Would you be interested in either reaching out to her or putting me in touch with her? I'd love to talk to her about what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
That's a great idea. Because I forget which was which, but Mansfield had a referendum.
Yes, yeah, they had a vote on it.
Right. I forget how Manchester did it, but Manchester came out with the directions. They said that we want the next 3 school renovations in Manchester to be net zero.
In Mansfield, they have 3 older schools. And so they're consolidating the 3 older schools into one. They're building a brand new one. And so that gave them the opportunity to do it. And so the cost justification was pretty overwhelming, for them to go ahead and do what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's going to be completed sometime next year.
And interestingly, both of those projects are going with geothermal too.
Yeah.
Do you know what the referendum cost was for Mansfield?
In Mansfield, it was last year.
Do you know what the cost was?
I don't know what the cost was.
Okay, I'm just curious.
The cost of the school of the project?
Yeah, to consolidate into one.
I've got that in these notes. I'll send all that around.
Thanks.
But it's really great. We're fortunate that we've got those 2 examples, and we are late in the sense that we didn't have a referendum that said we want a net zero school, or and the $36 million budget was set on cost estimates, but we're at least much earlier to the process than we were at the middle school, and we're not there to dictate the outcome, but really to just encourage people to consider this option. So I'm really pleased that that seems to be happening.
I'll reach out to her for you, Mark. See what we can do.
I think that's it on clean energy. What we should do is go back through our energy plan, what we said we were going to do, and maybe start to tackle one or two other things, bunch of activities. I know there was we've been just so busy that I did not take advantage of a new program that Eversource and UI just started. It's got a really long name, Community Partnership for Equity and Energy Efficiency. It's like CPEEE. And they're giving grant. They just announced they're giving grants to 10 communities. And these are substantial grants. They're like $20,000, $30,000. West Hartford just got one, and they're going to run a campaign to promote heat pumps. So I just didn't get our act together and to apply for that. But there will be additional rounds, and that might be something for us to consider, that if we want to do some kind of a campaign to promote energy efficiency or heat pumps, there's different categories. You can do efficiency, there's small business energy advantage, or solar. So we might, for the next round of that, try to have something ready for us to really try to make a difference on.
I like the small business part of it. That'd be, I think, really good for our town.
Yeah. All right, anything else on clean energy? I think that's all I've got. So, well, Eric, great. Thank you so much for joining us and sticking around. I think.
Thanks for having me.
I think as Elizabeth said, your overview of the town is going to just be huge, huge help to us. So, so I'll send out some of the materials that we just talked about. Joe, thank you for doing minutes. All
I just
right.
want to think the positive point from Elizabeth is I think she was impressed at our structure already, which was good because I think everybody's been working really hard.
Yeah.
No, I think
She's great.
all the way through this whole sustainable CT initiative, I think it's really shown that for decades we've been doing the right things. And we're really leading the way. We made silver on our first go around, and I think the real pressure is keeping ourselves held to that same high bar.
Yeah. Did you hear about West Hartford, Tom?
Which part about West Hartford?
They got silver, and they had something like 600 points. I think we had 425 or something.
We got over the bar mark. That's all that matters.
But it's not a
That's all that
competition. Right?
matters.
It's not a
That's all-
competition.
They used 200 extra that they could have saved for the next round.
Right. What did Elizabeth say? It's a carrot. It's a carrot, right?
Hey, we didn't want to show off.
Yeah, we don't want to gloat.
All right. Well, thanks, folks. Is there a motion to adjourn?